The silver serving tray bit into my palms as I balanced 6 champagne flutes through the swinging kitchen door, the acidic smell of scalded lemon and burnt garlic clinging to my uniform. My feet throbbed in the cheap flats I'd bought at a discount store that morning, 3 sizes too narrow, but all I could afford after my landlord raised the rent again. The grand dining room of the Castellano estate stretched before me like a cathedral of wealth, all marble columns and crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than the entire animal shelter where I'd worked until it closed 6 months ago. "Table 3 needs refreshments, and don't dawdle," Marco, the head butler, hissed as I passed. His Italian accent was thick with disapproval. "Mr. Castellano's guests are not accustomed to waiting." I nodded, keeping my eyes down the way I'd learned to do at these temporary serving gigs. Invisible. Forgettable. Just another pair of hands carrying drinks to people who would never remember my face. It was a far cry from my old life, spending days rehabilitating traumatized rescue dogs, teaching them to trust again after abuse and neglect. But the shelter's funding had dried up, and with it, my steady paycheck and sense of purpose. The 8 men at table 3 barely glanced at me as I distributed the champagne, their conversation continuing in low, urgent Italian. I caught fragments, something about shipments and territories and problems that needed handling. The kind of talk that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, the same instinct that told me when a dog was about to bite. I was halfway back to the kitchen when I heard it. A low, guttural growl that made my trained ear immediately catalog. Adult male, approximately 70 pounds, distressed, escalating toward aggression. I froze, champagne flutes still balanced on my tray, as a massive blue-nosed Pitbull rounded the corner of the dining room, hackles raised, teeth bared. "Merda," one of the security men swore, backing away slowly. I noticed the fresh bandage on his left hand, the way he cradled it protectively. "Zeus, no, stay." But the dog wasn't staying. Every line of his muscular body screamed anxiety and fear, not aggression. I'd seen it 100 times before. His ears were pinned back, his tail low and rigid, his breathing rapid and shallow. This wasn't a vicious animal. This was a terrified one. "Someone get Dominic," another guard shouted, reaching for something at his belt. "Before that beast hurts someone else." My body moved before my brain caught up, years of training overriding common sense. I set down the tray with deliberate slowness and lowered myself to the floor, making myself small and unthreatening. The marble was cold through my thin uniform as I sat cross-legged, turned my body sideways, and avoided direct eye contact. "What are you doing?" Marco's voice was sharp with panic. "Get away from that animal." I ignored him, keeping my breathing slow and steady. The Pitbull's attention fixed on me, confusion temporarily overriding his distress. Good. Confusion was better than panic. "Hey, buddy," I murmured, my voice low and calm. "I see you. I know you're scared. It's okay to be scared." "Miss, that dog has injured 3 of our men this week," a guard said urgently. "You need to move away. Now." But Zeus was already shifting, his weight redistributing, his ears flickering forward just slightly. I could read his body language like a book I'd studied for years. The slight relaxation of his shoulders, the microscopic decrease in his pupils. He was listening. I turned my head further away, offering him my profile, and extended one hand palm down toward the floor, not reaching for him, but simply existing in his space without demand or threat. The room had gone silent except for the ticking of an enormous grandfather clock and the Pitbull's heavy breathing. "That's it," I whispered. "No one here wants to hurt you. You're safe. You're okay." Zeus took one step toward me, then another. His nose twitched, taking in my scent, probably detecting the dozen shelter dogs I'd worked with that morning at the volunteer rescue downtown. The tension in his powerful body began to ebb, replaced by the cautious curiosity that every dog possessed before trauma taught them otherwise. "What is happening here?" The voice that cut through the room was deep, authoritative, and carried the weight of absolute command. I didn't need to look up to know this was Dominic Castellano, the man whose name the temporary agency had whispered with a mixture of awe and fear when they assigned me this gig. "Your dog, sir?" Marco began nervously. "The new server, she's..." Quiet. One word, and the entire room fell silent. I kept my focus on Zeus, who had frozen mid-step at his master's voice, his anxiety spiking again. I could feel Dominic's presence behind me, could smell the expensive cologne that probably cost more than my month's rent, but I didn't turn around. "Zeus," I said softly, drawing the dog's attention back to me. "It's okay. He's not angry with you. Nobody's angry." The Pitbull's dark eyes met mine, and in them I saw what I'd seen in every traumatized animal I'd ever worked with. Desperate hope warring with learned fear. Slowly, so slowly that it seemed to take forever, Zeus moved closer. His nose touched my outstretched hand, his warm breath huffing against my palm. "Good boy," I whispered, still not moving to touch him. "You're such a good boy." Zeus's tail gave one tentative wag, then another. And then, as if a switch had flipped, he sank down onto the marble floor beside me, his massive head coming to rest on my knee. The transformation was instantaneous. From tense, aggressive animal to exhausted dog seeking comfort. I finally risked a gentle hand on his head, scratching behind his ears with the pressure and rhythm I'd learned would calm even the most anxious dogs. Zeus's eyes drifted closed, his breathing deepening into the regular pattern of relaxation. "How did you do that?" The question came from directly above me, and I looked up for the first time into the face of Dominic Castellano. He was younger than I expected, mid-30s probably, with dark hair swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and harder edges. His eyes were the color of espresso, and they were currently fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. He wore his wealth casually, a black dress shirt with the first 4 buttons undone, revealing a glimpse of a toned chest, tailored pants that fit perfectly, and a watch that gleamed platinum in the chandelier light. "Desensitization techniques," I answered, keeping my voice steady despite my suddenly racing heart. "He's not aggressive, Mr. Castellano. He's anxious. Probably something triggered him. A loud noise, an unexpected movement. Fight or flight response." Dominic's gaze moved from me to his dog, who was now completely relaxed, practically melting against my leg. 3 of my men couldn't get near him. "You've been on the floor for less than 5 minutes and he's asleep." "Your men probably tried to dominate him," I said, scratching under Zeus's chin. "Show him who's boss. That doesn't work with traumatized dogs. It just reinforces their fear." "And you're an expert on traumatized dogs?" There was something in his voice I couldn't quite read. Skepticism mixed with genuine curiosity. "I was a professional animal behaviorist until 6 months ago," I admitted. "Worked at a rescue shelter specializing in aggressive and fearful cases. Zeus here would have been one of our success stories." Dominic crouched down beside me, and I caught the full force of that expensive cologne, something woodsy and complex that probably had a name in Italian. He studied Zeus, then me, his expression unreadable. "What happened 6 months ago?" "Shelter lost its funding, had to close." I kept my tone neutral, professional. This wasn't the time or place to discuss my current desperation, the way I'd scrambled from one temporary job to another, none of them lasting more than a week or 2. "And now you serve champagne." It wasn't quite a question, but I answered anyway. "Among other things, a girl's got to eat." His lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "What's your name?" "Maisie. Maisie Brooks." "Well, Maisie Brooks." Dominic stood, his movements fluid and controlled. "I have a proposition for you." My stomach dropped. I'd heard enough stories from other temporary workers about wealthy men and their propositions. My hand stilled on Zeus's fur. I need someone to manage Zeus, he continued, apparently oblivious to my discomfort. Someone who can actually control him without sedatives or restraints. My previous trainers have been unsuccessful. I'm not a dog trainer, Mr. Castellano. I'm a behaviorist. There's a difference. Then be my dog behaviorist. He said it as if it were the simplest thing in the world. Full-time, live-in position. Zeus responds to you. I'd like to keep it that way. I don't think... Name your price. The casual way he said it, as if money were merely a detail to be managed, reminded me exactly what kind of man I was dealing with. Dominic Castellano didn't ask. He bought. And right now, he was trying to buy me. I need to think about it, I said, carefully shifting Zeus's head so I could stand. My legs had gone numb from sitting on the cold marble. Dominic's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise, maybe, that someone had just told him no. Most people don't need to think about financial security. Most people don't know what they're getting into. I met his gaze steadily, drawing on every ounce of backbone I'd developed working with dogs that could literally tear me apart. I've seen your type before, Mr. Castellano. Men who think they can fix problems with money and force. It doesn't work with animals, and I doubt it works with people either. The room had gone deathly silent. I could feel Marco's horror radiating from across the room, could sense the security guards tensing. You didn't talk to Dominic Castellano like that. Everyone knew it. But Dominic just smiled. A slow, dangerous smile that made something in my stomach flip. You're right, he said softly. It doesn't. Which is why I'm asking you to help Zeus, not force him into submission. He paused, his gaze holding mine. Think about it, Miss Brooks, but don't think too long. Zeus needs someone who understands him, and I pay very well for loyalty and discretion. Before I could respond, Zeus lifted his head from where I'd positioned him and patted over to Dominic, pressing against his leg with none of the earlier anxiety. Dominic's hand dropped automatically to the dog's head, scratching in exactly the spot I'd discovered Zeus liked best. He trusts you, I observed. Whatever triggered his anxiety, it wasn't you. No, Dominic agreed, his attention still on the dog. It wasn't. There was a story there. Layers of complication I probably didn't want to uncover. But Zeus was looking at me with those dark, hopeful eyes, and I'd never been able to walk away from an animal in need. Even when that animal came with a master who radiated danger and control in equal measure. I'll need to assess his living conditions, I heard myself say. See his routine, his diet, where he sleeps. And I want to know what happened to cause his anxiety spike. The real story, not whatever you've been telling your staff. Dominic's smile widened fractionally. Done. Marco will show you to Zeus's quarters. We'll discuss terms in my study in 1 hour. He turned and walked away, Zeus trotting contentedly at his heels, leaving me standing in the middle of his grand dining room with my cheap shoes pinching my feet, and the sudden, terrifying realization that I'd just agreed to enter the world of a man whose very name made people nervous. Marco appeared at my elbow, his expression a mixture of shock and grudging respect. This way, Miss Brooks. Though I should warn you, nobody says no to Mr. Castellano, not even halfway. As I followed him through the maze of marble corridors, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made either the best or worst decision of my life. And I had exactly 1 hour to figure out which. Zeus's quarters turned out to be a converted sunroom at the east end of the mansion, all floor-to-ceiling windows and heated floors that probably cost more than most people's entire homes. Someone had clearly tried to make it comfortable. There was an expensive orthopedic dog bed the size of a queen mattress, a wall of built-in cabinets that I suspected held enough toys and supplies to stock a pet store, and a feeding station with stainless steel bowls that gleamed like surgical instruments. But it was all wrong. The windows, I said. gesturing to the glass walls that offered a panoramic view of the estate's grounds. They're making him anxious. Too much visual stimulation. Too many potential threats to monitor. He can't relax. Marco's eyebrows rose. Mr. Castellano specifically requested that Zeus have access to sunlight and views. That's lovely for a well-adjusted dog. Zeus isn't well-adjusted. I walked the perimeter of the room, taking in the pristine condition of everything. And where does he actually sleep? His bed is... Where does he sleep, Marco? Not where you've put his bed. Where he actually sleeps. The butler's jaw tightened. Recently, he's been found sleeping in Mr. Castellano's closet. We've tried to redirect him back here, but he becomes... difficult. Of course he did. Zeus was seeking a den. Somewhere small, dark, and enclosed where he could feel safe. This glass palace was the opposite of safe for an anxious animal. I'll need blackout curtains, I said, already making a mental list. Heavy ones. And we're moving that bed into the adjacent hallway closet, the one with no windows. He needs a proper den space. Miss Brooks, I hardly think... Do you want Zeus to stop injuring your security team or not? Marco's expression soured, but he nodded curtly. I'll have the maintenance staff begin immediately. Is there anything else? I opened one of the built-in cabinets and found exactly what I'd suspected. Dozens of toys still in their packaging, expensive training treats never opened, and a collection of shock collars and restraint equipment that made my stomach turn. All of this goes, I said, gesturing to the punishment tools. Tonight. Mr. Castellano uses those for... I don't care what Mr. Castellano uses them for. If he wants me to help Zeus, this is non-negotiable. I spent the next 45 minutes documenting everything. Zeus's feeding schedule, irregular and inconsistent. His exercise routine, sporadic walks with nervous handlers who clearly didn't know how to read canine body language, and his socialization attempts, forced interactions with other dogs that had predictably ended in conflict. By the time Marco returned to escort me to Dominic's study, I had a preliminary assessment and approximately 67 concerns. The study was exactly what I'd expected, all dark wood paneling and leather furniture, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves that actually looked used, unlike most wealthy people's decorative literature. Dominic sat behind a massive desk, Zeus curled at his feet, both of them looking up as I entered. Miss Brooks. He gestured to a chair across from him. I trust Zeus's accommodations meet your standards. They will, once we make some changes. I sat, crossing my legs and pulling out the notes I'd taken on my phone. Your current setup is actively harming him. He needs a complete routine overhaul. Different sleeping arrangements, consistent feeding schedule, proper socialization techniques, and zero use of punishment-based training tools. Dominic's expression remained neutral, but his fingers steepled in front of him. My previous trainers recommended those tools. Your previous trainers were idiots who probably learned everything they know from television. I kept my voice matter-of-fact. Punishment doesn't teach. It suppresses. Zeus isn't learning better behavior. He's learning to fear more things. Eventually, that fear will override his ability to control his responses, and someone will get seriously hurt. Someone has already gotten seriously hurt. Dominic's gaze was direct, unwavering. 3 times. Because you keep using methods that escalate his anxiety instead of addressing the root cause. I leaned forward. Mr. Castellano, Zeus isn't a bad dog. He's a traumatized dog. There's a crucial difference. And what traumatized him? I hesitated. This was the question I'd been dreading, because the answer mattered more than anything else in determining whether I could actually help. That's what you're going to tell me, right now. The whole truth, not the sanitized version. Dominic studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, walked to a sidebar, and poured himself 2 fingers of something amber. He didn't offer me any, which was probably for the best. Zeus was a gift, he said finally, his back to me as he stared out the window. From my father, before he died 2 years ago. The dog was bred specifically for protection. Guard dog bloodlines, trained from birth to be aggressive and territorial. My father thought I needed something. Loyal. The way he said loyal made it clear he meant something else entirely. Controllable. Disposable. A living weapon. When my father died, Zeus was 3 years old and had been trained to attack on command. Very effective for intimidation. Less effective for actual companionship. Dominic turned back to face me. I've spent 2 years trying to undo that training, with limited success. He's manageable with me, but with everyone else. He defaults to fight mode because that's what he was conditioned to do. I finished the thought. And then your people use pain-based corrections, which reinforces his belief that other humans are threats, which makes him more aggressive, which makes them use harsher corrections. It's a spiral. Precisely. I looked down at Zeus, who was watching me with those intelligent dark eyes. What triggered the recent escalation? Something changed a week ago. Dominic's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. A business associate visited. He made an aggressive gesture toward me during a negotiation. Nothing serious, just posturing. Zeus reacted. After that, his anxiety around visitors increased significantly. Business associate, negotiation, aggressive gesture. The careful euphemisms didn't hide what this mansion really was. The center of Dominic Castellano's empire. The kind of empire that required guard dogs and armed security, and business associates, who made aggressive gestures. I need full disclosure, I said. If Zeus is going to be exposed to dangerous situations on a regular basis, I need to know what we're dealing with. My business often involves tense interactions. Your business is illegal. I said it flatly, not as a question. You're not a legitimate businessman, Mr. Castellano. Everyone in the city knows that. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or surprise that I'd said it out loud. What everyone knows and what they can prove are two different things. I don't care about proof. I care about Zeus's welfare. If he's going to be in situations where violence is possible, I need to prepare him differently than if he were a normal house pet. Dominic moved back to his desk, leaning against it with casual authority. Are you saying you'll take the position? Was I? This was insane. I'd be living in a crime lord's mansion, working with a potentially dangerous dog, embedded in a world I'd spent my entire life avoiding. The smart thing would be to walk away, go back to serving champagne at temporary jobs, keep struggling along with 3 roommates in a studio apartment that smelled like mildew. But Zeus was looking at me with those hopeful eyes, and I'd never been able to walk away from a dog in need. Even when that dog came with complications that could probably get me killed. I'll take it, I heard myself say. But I have conditions. Name them. I need full authority over Zeus's care. No one overrides my decisions about his training, feeding, or routine. I need access to him 24/7, which means I live on site, and I need a guaranteed salary for at least 6 months while we work through his issues. Done, done, and done. Dominic pulled open a desk drawer and withdrew a folder. I had my attorney draw up a contract this afternoon. I stared at him. You drew up a contract before I even agreed? I'm a man who plans ahead, Miss Brooks. The contract includes the terms you just stated, plus health insurance, housing stipend, and a performance bonus if Zeus shows measurable improvement within 90 days. He slid the folder across the desk. Review it with your own attorney if you'd like. I don't have an attorney. I opened the folder and scanned the dense legal text. The salary listed made me blink. It was triple what I'd made at the shelter, more than enough to clear my debts and actually start saving. This is very generous. I value competence. Dominic's gaze was steady. And I believe you're competent. Prove me right. I should have taken time to read every clause, should have run this past someone with more sense than me, should have done approximately 17 things differently. Instead, I found myself signing my name at the bottom of the contract, committing myself to 6 months in the orbit of a man whose very presence made my pulse race with something I didn't want to examine too closely. "Marco will show you to your quarters," Dominic said, taking the signed contract and filing it away. "You can start moving in tomorrow. In the meantime, I've arranged for a full veterinary workup for Zeus. I want to rule out any medical issues that might be contributing to his anxiety." "That's actually very thoughtful." His smile was slight but genuine. "I care about my dog, Miss Brooks. That's why I'm hiring the best." As I stood to leave, Zeus patted over and leaned against my leg, his warm weight solid and trusting. I scratched behind his ears automatically, and Dominic watched the interaction with that same unreadable expression. "He likes you," he observed. "Zeus doesn't like anyone. He just needed someone to listen to him." I met Dominic's gaze. Most creatures do. I left the study with Marco, but I could feel Dominic's eyes on me all the way to the door. And as I rode back to my cramped apartment in an Uber that Dominic had insisted on arranging, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just stepped into something far more complicated than a dog rehabilitation job. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Welcome to the family, Miss Brooks. DC." I stared at the message for a long time, trying to decide if the flutter in my stomach was excitement or dread. Eventually, I decided it was probably both. Moving into the Castellano mansion was like stepping into a parallel universe where everything I touched cost more than my yearly salary. My quarters turned out to be a 3-room suite with a bedroom larger than my entire previous apartment, a private bathroom with heated floors and a rainfall shower that probably violated water conservation laws, and a sitting room with French doors that opened onto a private terrace overlooking the estate's rose garden. "This is too much," I told Marco as he deposited my 2 battered suitcases, literally everything I owned, in the walk-in closet that was currently 98% empty. "Mr. Castellano insisted you have comfortable accommodations," Marco replied, his tone suggesting this was actually quite modest by mansion standards. "Your rooms are adjacent to Zeus's new quarters, which should make night calls easier." Night calls. Right. Because apparently Zeus had separation anxiety on top of everything else, and often woke at 3 a.m. needing reassurance. I'd discovered this during my first overnight observation, when I'd found him pacing the hallways, panting with stress, clearly searching for Dominic, who'd been working late in his study. That had been 3 days ago. Now I'd established a routine. Morning walk at 6, breakfast at 7, training sessions from 8 to 10, free play from 10 to noon, lunch, afternoon rest, evening walk at 5, dinner at 6, and quiet time until bed. Zeus's anxiety had already decreased noticeably. The blackout curtains and den space made him feel secure, and the consistent schedule gave him predictability. But the real breakthrough came when I started addressing the root cause of his trauma. "Let me get this straight," I said to Dominic during our evening check-in on day 5. We'd fallen into a pattern of meeting in his study at 7 to discuss Zeus's progress. "Your father trained Zeus using electric shock collars and physical punishment?" Dominic's jaw tightened. My father believed in discipline, for dogs and people. I studied him, seeing for the first time the shadows beneath the polished exterior. "Did he use the same methods on you?" "That's not relevant to Zeus's care." "It's absolutely relevant. Zeus bonds with you because he recognizes shared trauma." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "He feels safe with you because you understand what he's been through." "That's not a bad thing, Mr. Castellano, but it means his recovery is tied to yours." Dominic stood abruptly, moving to the window with that fluid grace that reminded me of a predator. "I'm not the one being rehabilitated here, Miss Brooks." "Aren't you?" I challenged. "You keep everyone at arm's length except Zeus. Your staff is terrified of you. You conduct your business with threats and force. You've built an entire empire on fear. just like your father trained Zeus, through pain and intimidation. He turned to face me, and the expression in his dark eyes made my breath catch. Not anger exactly, but something rawer, more vulnerable. You don't know anything about my life. I know what I see, and what I see is a man who's as trapped as his dog was, just in a different kind of cage. I stood, moving closer despite every instinct that told me to maintain distance. Zeus is healing because someone finally gave him safety and consistency without punishment. When was the last time someone did that for you? The silence stretched between us, charged with something I didn't want to name. Dominic's gaze held mine, and I could see him weighing whether to be angry or honest. My father died 2 years ago, he said finally, his voice low. I took over his organization and spent every day since trying to prove I was worthy of his legacy, that I was strong enough, ruthless enough, feared enough. He paused. Zeus was his final gift, a reminder of what strength looked like to him. Absolute dominance through absolute control. That's not strength, I said softly. That's just another form of fear. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the armor he wore so carefully. What would you know about fear? Miss Brooks? You waltz into dangerous situations, challenge men twice your size, tell me how to run my life. I'm terrified, I interrupted. Every single day. I'm terrified I'll fail Zeus. I'm terrified of what your world represents. I'm terrified that I'm starting to see you as more than just my employer, and that's the most dangerous thing of all. The admission hung in the air between us. I hadn't meant to say it, hadn't meant to reveal that the way he looked at me made my pulse race, that our evening check-ins had become the part of my day I looked forward to most, that sometimes I caught myself watching him with Zeus and feeling something that had nothing to do with professional assessment. Dominic crossed the space between us in 2 strides, and suddenly he was close enough that I could smell that expensive cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his body. You should be terrified of me, he said, his voice rough. Everyone else is. I'm not everyone else. His hand came up, fingers ghosting along my jaw in a touch so light it might have been imagined. No, you're not. The moment shattered, as Zeus barked sharply from the doorway, his alert bark, the one that meant someone was approaching. Dominic stepped back immediately, his expression shuddering back into that controlled mask, and I forced myself to breathe normally, despite my racing heart. Marco appeared seconds later, his face tight with tension. Sir, Victor Morozov is here. He's asking for a meeting. Every line of Dominic's body went rigid. Tell him I'm not available. He's insisting, sir. He's brought 6 men. They're in the entrance hall. I'd heard that name before. Victor Morozov, head of the Russian syndicate that controlled the north side of Chicago. One of Dominic's main rivals. And according to the whispered conversations I'd overheard from staff, someone who'd been making aggressive moves into Castellano territory. I should go, I said, moving toward the door with Zeus at my heels. No. Dominic's voice stopped me. Stay here. Lock the door after I leave. Don't open it for anyone but me or Marco. Dominic, please, Maisie. The use of my first name, the genuine concern in his eyes, made my chest tighten. Morozov is dangerous. If he knows I care about someone, he'll use it against me. If he knows I care about someone. The words echoed in my mind as Dominic left with Marco, Zeus whining softly beside me as his master disappeared. I locked the door as instructed, then moved to the window that overlooked the entrance courtyard. 6 black SUVs were parked in a semicircle, and I could see men in dark suits positioned strategically around them. Through the mansion's windows, I caught glimpses of movement. Dominic descending the grand staircase, Victor Morozov stepping forward with a predator's smile. 2 groups of armed men facing off in what was clearly a powder keg waiting for a spark. Zeus's whining intensified, his anxiety spiking as he sensed the tension. I dropped to the floor beside him, pulling him close and applying the pressure therapy techniques that calmed him. It's okay, buddy. Your dad's okay. He'll be back. But I wasn't sure I believed it. I'd been naive, I realized, thinking I could exist in Dominic's world without getting pulled into its dangers. This wasn't just about rehabilitating a traumatized dog. This was about being connected to a man whose enemies would absolutely use me as leverage if they knew I mattered to him. The confrontation lasted 20 minutes. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I could read body language well enough to see the escalating aggression. Victor gesturing sharply, Dominic standing stone still in that way that radiated coiled violence, the security teams on both sides gradually moving closer to their weapons. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it ended. Victor laughed. I could see it from the window, that cold, calculated laugh, and gestured to his men. They retreated to their vehicles and pulled away, leaving Dominic standing alone in the courtyard, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. I heard his footsteps on the stairs minutes later, heard him unlock the study door. He entered looking like he'd aged a decade, the polished facade cracked just enough to show the exhaustion underneath. What did he want? I asked, still sitting on the floor with Zeus. What they always want. Territory, power, acknowledgement that they're eating away at my control piece by piece. Dominic sank into his desk chair, and Zeus immediately went to him, resting his massive head on Dominic's knee. He knows I'm trying to legitimize my operations. He sees it as weakness. Trying to leave isn't weakness. In my world, it is. Dominic's hand moved automatically to scratch Zeus's ears. My father built this empire through fear and violence. Every day I try to move away from that is a day someone like Morozov sees an opening. I stood, moving closer. Then maybe it's time to move away faster, completely. He looked up at me, and in his eyes I saw the same trapped desperation I'd seen in Zeus when we first met. It's not that simple. I have responsibilities, people who depend on me, obligations. You have choices, I corrected. They might be hard choices with serious consequences, but they're still choices. Zeus couldn't choose his situation, but you can choose yours. And what would you have me do, Maisie? Walk away from everything my father built? The men who've been loyal to me for years? The operations that support dozens of families? The balance of power that keeps this city from descending into chaos? I'd have you choose what kind of man you want to be. Not what your father was. Not what Victor Morozov expects. Not what your organization needs. What you actually want. The question seemed to stun him. He stared at me as if I'd asked something in a foreign language. I don't know if I get to want things, he said finally. So quietly I almost didn't hear it. Everyone gets to want things. Most people just don't have the courage to pursue them. Dominic stood, closing the distance between us until I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. And what if what I want is dangerous? What if it puts people at risk? What do you want, Dominic? His gaze dropped to my lips, then back to my eyes. Something I have no right to want. Someone who deserves better than my world. My breath caught. Let me make my own decisions about what I deserve. Maisie, Zeus barked again, sharp and urgent, and this time the alarm was unmistakable. Dominic's phone buzzed simultaneously, and I saw his face go completely white as he read the message. What is it? Morozov didn't leave. Some of his men stayed behind. Dominic was already moving, pulling a gun from his desk drawer with practiced ease. They're on the east grounds, near your quarters. Ice flooded my veins. Why would they? Because they watched me talk to you in the courtyard. Because they saw how I looked at you. His jaw clenched. Because Victor Morozov is making a point about how easily he can touch what matters to me. What matters to me. The words should have thrilled me. Instead, they filled me with dread. Marco, Dominic barked into his phone. Lock down the mansion. Get security to the East Wing. Now. He turned to me. You stay here with Zeus. Don't open this door for anyone. Dominic, if they're after me to get to you, which is exactly why you're staying here where I know you're safe. He was at the door already, all business, the vulnerability from moments ago completely hidden. Zeus, guard. The Pitbull positioned himself between me and the door instantly, his training kicking in despite months of rehabilitation. This was what he'd been bred for, what his first 3 years had prepared him for. Protection through violence. Don't let him hurt anyone unless absolutely necessary, I called as Dominic disappeared into the hallway. He's finally learning that people aren't threats. But Dominic was already gone, and I was left alone with Zeus, whose body had gone rigid with anticipation, all his anxiety channeled into focused alertness. I could hear shouting from somewhere in the mansion, the sound of running feet, doors slamming. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Miss Brooks. Victor Morozov's accented voice was smooth, almost friendly. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. How did you get this number? I make it my business to know everything about Dominic Castellano's associates. You're new. Unprotected. A dog trainer, I'm told. How fascinating. What do you want? To give you advice, actually. Woman to woman, so to speak. His laugh was cold. Men like Dominic don't have relationships, Miss Brooks. They have possessions. And possessions get broken when they're no longer useful. Ask his last 3 girlfriends. Oh, wait. You can't. They all disappeared rather mysteriously. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my hands shaking. Was he lying? Probably. This was psychological warfare, an attempt to drive a wedge between me and Dominic. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The study door burst open 20 minutes later. Dominic entered, his shirt torn, a cut above his eyebrow bleeding sluggishly. Zeus lunged forward with a happy whine, all aggression forgotten in relief at his master's return. Are you hurt? I asked, rushing to him. I'm fine. They're gone. He caught my hands as I reached for the cut on his face. Maisie, I'm so sorry. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid. What did they want? To prove they could get close to you. To send a message. His grip on my hands tightened. Victor knows I'm trying to move away from violence. He's testing whether I'll abandon that conviction if someone I care about is threatened. And will you? The look in his eyes was answer enough. I will burn his entire organization to the ground if he touches you. That's exactly what he wants, I said urgently. Don't you see? He's trying to pull you back into that world, to prove you haven't changed. If you retaliate with violence, you've given him exactly what he wants. What else can I do? He knows you matter to me. He'll keep pushing until... Then make me not matter. The words came out before I'd fully thought them through. Publicly. Make it clear I'm just an employee, not someone you care about. Remove me as a target. Absolutely not. Dominic, I said no. His voice was steel. I'm not pretending you don't matter to protect you from my enemies. That's not protection. That's cowardice. It's strategy. It's smart. It's not happening. He pulled me closer, his forehead nearly touching mine. Listen to me, Maisie. I've spent 2 years trying to be different from my father, trying to build something better than what he left me. And every day someone tells me it's impossible, that I can't change, that I'll always be what he made me. But then you walked into my life and looked at Zeus, at me, and saw something worth saving. I'm not walking away from that. I'm not pretending you don't matter when you're the first person in years who's made me believe I could be better. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe. You can't protect me from your entire world, Dominic. It's impossible. Watch me try. He kissed me then, and it wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate and claiming and full of all the things he couldn't say. I kissed him back just as fiercely, because despite every logical reason to run, despite the danger and the complications and the impossible situation we'd created, I was falling for him. Zeus barked, a happy, excited bark this time, and we broke apart, both breathing hard. Dominic's thumb traced my lower lip, his eyes dark with emotion. "This changes everything," he said. "I know. Victor won't stop. He'll escalate. He'll use you to break me. Then we'll face it together. You, me, and Zeus." I smiled slightly. The world's most unusual pack. His laugh was soft, almost surprised. "You're insane." "Probably. But so are you. And look how far Zeus has come." I glanced down at the Pitbull, who was watching us with his tail wagging slowly. We're all just traumatized creatures trying to learn how to trust again. Dominic pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me in a hold that felt both protective and vulnerable. "I don't know how to do this. How to be with someone without putting them in danger. How to change my life without destroying everything I've built. One step at a time," I murmured into his chest. Just like rehabilitating Zeus. We assess the situation, we make a plan, we move forward with consistency and patience. And if I fail, then we try again. That's how change works. We stood there for a long moment, holding each other while Zeus leaned against our legs. The three of us forming a connection that should have been impossible, but somehow felt inevitable. I didn't know then that within 72 hours, Victor Morozov would make good on his threats. That everything we'd built together would be tested in ways I couldn't imagine. That the choice Dominic made in the next few days would determine not just our future, but the future of dozens of people whose lives intersected with his empire. All I knew in that moment was that I'd found something worth fighting for. And so had he. The next 2 days passed in a strange state of heightened alertness. Dominic doubled security around the mansion, forbade me from leaving the grounds, and started spending more time in his study with lawyers and accountants, working on what he called his exit strategy. Meanwhile, Zeus's progress continued. His anxiety levels had dropped significantly. He no longer showed aggression toward staff, and he'd even started playing, something Marco told me he hadn't done since he was a puppy. "You've worked a miracle," Dominic said on the morning of the third day. We were in the rose garden, watching Zeus chase a ball with puppy-like enthusiasm. I didn't think it was possible. He just needed someone to understand him, and time, and safety. I glanced at him. Same things everyone needs, really. Dominic caught my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. We hadn't discussed the kiss, hadn't labeled what was developing between us, but the connection was undeniable. Every evening, check-in lasted longer. Every accidental touch felt electric. Every moment alone together was charged with possibility. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, "about choosing what kind of man I want to be. And I want to be the kind of man who deserves you, the kind Zeus trusts completely, the kind who doesn't rule through fear." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I've started liquidating the illegal operations. Slowly, carefully, making sure everyone who depends on me has legitimate alternatives. It'll take time, maybe a year, maybe 2. But I'm done living my father's life." My chest tightened with emotion. "Dominic, that's incredibly brave." "It's incredibly dangerous," he corrected. "Victor isn't the only one who'll see it as weakness. Some of my own men might turn against me. The transition period will be..." Zeus's playful demeanor changed instantly. His ears pricked forward, his body going rigid, and he released a low, warning growl that made every hair on my arms stand up. I'd learned to read his signals with expert precision now, and this was unmistakable. Threat approaching. Inside, Dominic ordered, already moving to shield me with his body. Now. But it was too late. 3 black vans screeched to a halt at the garden service entrance, the one gate that was being repaired and wasn't fully operational. Men in tactical gear poured out, moving with military precision. I saw the insignia on their vests and my blood ran cold. Morozov's private security team. "Run!" Dominic hissed, pushing me toward the mansion. Marcos activated the lockdown protocol. Get inside and... I didn't hear the rest because Zeus had launched himself at the closest man, 100 pounds of protective fury defending his pack. The man went down with a scream, and suddenly there were gunshots, and Dominic was returning fire with a weapon he'd pulled from somewhere, and everything dissolved into chaos. I should have run. Every survival instinct screamed at me to get inside, to find safety. But Zeus was in the middle of the firefight, and I couldn't leave him. I couldn't leave either of them. "Zeus," I called, using the emergency recall command we'd been practicing. "Zeus, to me, now." The Pitbull's training warred with his protective instincts, but finally he disengaged, sprinting back to me with blood on his muzzle. I couldn't tell if it was his or someone else's. I grabbed his collar, pulling him toward the mansion's terrace doors, but someone blocked our path. Viktor Morozov himself, flanked by 2 massive bodyguards, stood between me and safety. Up close, he was younger than I'd expected. Maybe 40, with pale eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. "Miss Brooks," he said pleasantly, as if we'd met at a cocktail party. "What a pleasure to finally make your acquaintance." "Let her go, Victor." Dominic's voice was deadly calm behind me. I could hear the barely controlled rage underneath. "This is between you and me." "But that's exactly the point, Dominic. Everything is between you and me, including her." Victor's gaze traveled over me with clinical assessment. "You care about her. The great Dominic Castellano, who never cares about anything except power, has developed feelings. How inconvenient for you." Zeus was growling continuously, a low rumble that vibrated through my grip on his collar. I could feel the tension in his body, could sense him seconds away from attacking. If he did, they'd kill him. I knew it with absolute certainty. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "Direct. I like that." Victor smiled. "I want Dominic to understand that his little redemption arc is over. He doesn't get to walk away from this life. He doesn't get to legitimize his operations and leave the rest of us to deal with the chaos he created. And most importantly," his pale eyes hardened, "he doesn't get to be happy while I'm still fighting for scraps in his father's shadow." "This isn't about territory," Dominic said quietly. "This is personal. My father chose me to succeed him instead of you. Your father chose you because you were his blood, not because you were worthy." Victor's mask of civility cracked, showing the rage underneath. "I worked for him for 15 years. I was loyal when you were still learning which fork to use at dinner. And he gave everything to you simply because you were his son." The family drama I'd stumbled into made sudden sense. Victor wasn't just a rival. He was a spurned successor, someone who'd believed he'd earned the Castellano Empire, only to have it given to Dominic by birthright. "So, this is about revenge," I said. "Against a dead man, and the son who inherited what you wanted." Victor's attention snapped back to me. "Clever girl. Yes, exactly. And you, Miss Brooks, are going to help me achieve that revenge." "By killing her?" Dominic's voice was razor sharp. "That makes you exactly what my father always said. Too emotional for leadership. Too focused on the personal instead of the strategic." "I'm not going to kill her." Victor's smile returned. "I'm going to take her, Keep her somewhere safe until you sign over 50% of your operations to me. Then maybe, she'll be returned unharmed. Dominic, don't, I started. But Victor nodded to his bodyguards. What happened next occurred in seconds, but felt like hours. The bodyguards moved toward me. Zeus lunged, teeth bared. I released his collar, knowing that holding him back would only get him hurt. Dominic fired, dropping one bodyguard instantly. Zeus took down the other, his jaws clamping onto the man's arm with terrifying efficiency. But Victor had anticipated this. He had his own weapon out, pointed not at me or Dominic, but at Zeus. Call him off, Victor said calmly. Or I put a bullet in your pet. Zeus, out, I commanded, my voice breaking. Out, now. Zeus released the bodyguard immediately, trained obedience overriding everything else. He returned to my side, panting and bloody, and I could feel him shaking with adrenaline and confusion. He'd done everything right, protected his pack, followed commands, and now he was being threatened anyway. Good dog, Victor said mockingly. Now, Miss Brooks, you're going to come with me quietly, or I shoot the dog, then Dominic, then you. Your choice. I looked at Dominic, saw the anguish in his eyes, the impossible calculation he was making. If he gave in, Victor won. If he fought, we might all die. There was no good option. I'll go, I said quietly. Don't hurt them. Maisie, no. It's okay. I met Dominic's gaze, trying to convey everything I felt in that look. You know what to do. You've always known. I was betting everything that Dominic would understand what I meant, that the only way out of this world was through it, that sometimes surrender was the strategic choice, that saving lives mattered more than pride or power. I was betting that the man I'd fallen for would make the right choice, even if it meant losing everything his father had built. Victor's men grabbed me roughly, zip-tying my wrists behind my back. Zeus barked frantically, trying to follow. But Dominic caught his collar, holding him back even as I could see it was killing him to let me go. 48 hours, Victor called as they dragged me toward the vans. Sign the contracts, transfer the operations, and she goes free. Fight me, and you'll never find her body. I was shoved into the back of a van, the doors slamming shut on Dominic's anguished face, and Zeus's desperate barking. As we pulled away from the mansion, I caught one last glimpse through the tinted window. Dominic on his knees in the rose garden, Zeus pressed against his side, both of them watching me disappear. I'd told him he knew what to do. I just hoped I was right. The room where they kept me was surprisingly comfortable. A bedroom in what seemed to be a high-end apartment, complete with an attached bathroom and a window that had been screwed shut and covered with bars. Not a dungeon, but definitely a prison. I'd been there for what I estimated was 18 hours, based on the 2 meals that had been delivered through a slot in the locked door. I spent the time doing what I did best, observing, assessing, looking for patterns. My captors changed shifts every 6 hours. The apartment was on an upper floor, probably 5th or 6th based on the view. There were always at least 2 guards outside my door, and I could hear others moving around the apartment. Victor visited once, making sure I was comfortable in a way that made my skin crawl, but he didn't touch me. Whatever his plan was, keeping me unharmed seemed to be part of it. For now. I didn't let myself think about Dominic, about what choice he was making, about whether I'd ever see Zeus again. That way lay panic, and panic wouldn't help me. Instead, I cataloged every detail of my surroundings, looking for weaknesses, opportunities, anything I could use. On hour 26, something changed. I heard shouting from the main room, then gunfire, sharp cracks that made me dive behind the bed. The shooting lasted maybe 30 seconds, then silence, heavy silence that made my heart pound. The door to my room burst open. I braced for Victor or his men, but instead, Zeus! The Pitbull barreled into the room, followed immediately by Dominic and a tactical team I didn't recognize. Zeus practically tackled me, whining and licking my face, his entire body vibrating with relief. I buried my face in his fur, finally letting the tears come. "Are you hurt?" Dominic was kneeling beside me, cutting through the zip ties with a knife, his hands gentle despite the obvious urgency. "Maisie, did they hurt you?" "I'm fine. I'm okay." I looked up at him, saw the exhaustion in his face, the barely controlled violence still thrumming through his body. "How did you find me?" "Zeus." He glanced at the dog with something like wonder. "He tracked your scent from the garden to the van, then we used traffic cameras to follow the route." Victor was sloppy. He didn't expect Zeus to be trained in tracking. I didn't even know he could do it until he started pulling me toward the city. "That's not possible. He's not trained in—" I stopped, realization dawning. "His early training. Before your father tried to make him aggressive. He was probably trained as a detection dog first. Whatever the reason, he found you." Dominic helped me to my feet, his arm supporting me when my legs wobbled. "Can you walk? We need to leave. Now." "Where's Victor?" "Dead." Dominic's voice was flat, emotionless. "Along with most of his operation. The ones who survived are being handled by the FBI." "The FBI?" I stared at him. "Dominic, what did you do?" "What you told me to do." He met my gaze steadily. "I made a choice. I chose you over the Empire. Chose the right thing over my father's legacy. I gave the FBI everything. Names, records, locations, every illegal operation I inherited, every connection, every dirty secret. It's all gone. I'm done." The magnitude of what he'd done hit me like a physical blow. He'd destroyed his entire world, burned down everything his father had built, made himself a target for every criminal organization he'd just betrayed. And he'd done it to save me. "The FBI made a deal," he continued, already guiding me toward the door with Zeus pressed against my other side. "Full immunity in exchange for my cooperation. They've been building a case against the major crime families for years. I just gave them everything they needed to prosecute. It's over, Maisie. All of it." We moved through the apartment quickly, stepping over bodies I tried not to look at too closely. The tactical team, FBI agents I realize now, secured our exit, and within minutes we were in an armored vehicle speeding away from the building. "What happens now?" I asked, finally able to breathe again with Zeus's warm weight pressed against my legs and Dominic's hand gripping mine. "Witness protection, initially. New identities, new location, complete severance from my old life." He looked at me, vulnerability naked in his eyes. "For me, you don't have to come. You didn't sign up for any of this. You can go back to your life. Be safe. Be free. Dominic." I squeezed his hand. "Where else would I go? You and Zeus are my pack now." His smile was small but genuine, the first real smile I'd seen since this nightmare began. "You're insane." "We've established that, but so is Zeus, and look how well his rehabilitation is going." I glanced at the Pitbull, who was pressed against both of us, refusing to let either of us out of his sight. "Besides, you still need a dog behaviorist. Witness protection is going to be stressful for him." "For all of us," Dominic murmured, pulling me closer. The FBI safe house was nothing like Dominic's mansion. A modest ranch house in suburban Illinois with 3 bedrooms, a small yard, and neighbors who probably worked normal jobs and worried about normal things like mortgage payments and lawn maintenance. We spent 3 weeks there while the FBI processed everything. While Dominic testified, while the dominoes he'd toppled continued falling across Chicago's criminal underworld. Zeus adapted better than I'd expected. The quiet neighborhood, the consistent routine, the absence of constant threat. It was exactly what he needed. His anxiety decreased daily. He started playing with toys again. He learned to trust the FBI handlers who came and went. He was finally becoming the dog he should have been from the beginning. Dominic's adaptation was harder. I'd wake in the middle of the night to find him standing at the window, staring out at the quiet street with the look of a man who'd lost everything. I'd go to him then, wrap my arms around him from behind, remind him that he'd gained something more important. His freedom, his integrity, his chance to be the man he'd always wanted to be. "I destroyed dozens of families," he said one night, his voice raw. "My men, their operations, their livelihoods. I took it all away." "You gave them a chance to start over," I corrected gently. "Same chance you're taking. Some of them will make good choices, some won't. But that's not your responsibility anymore." Everything was my responsibility. That's what it meant to be my father's son. "You're not your father." I turned him to face me. "You're the man who chose to save me over everything else. The man who's teaching Zeus that trust is possible. The man who's brave enough to build something new from nothing." He pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine. "I don't know how to be anything except what I was. Then we'll figure it out together, one day at a time, just like Zeus." The breakthrough came on week 4, when the FBI agent assigned to our case, a stern woman named Matthews who'd initially seemed skeptical of my presence, arrived with news. "The prosecutions are moving forward. We've got enough testimony and evidence to put away most of Chicago's major crime families for decades." She looked at Dominic. "You kept your end of the deal. Now we keep ours. Witness protection starts tomorrow. New names, new location, new life." "And Maisie?" Dominic asked immediately. "Miss Brooks isn't technically part of the program, but given the threat level and her connection to you, we're extending protection to her as well. She'll need to break all ties with her previous life, same as you." I thought about that. My few remaining friends, my rented apartment that I'd already abandoned, the career that had ended when the shelter closed. There wasn't much to leave behind, honestly. Everything that mattered to me was in this room. Dominic, Zeus, and the future we were building together. "I'm in," I said simply. Matthews nodded. "Then tomorrow you become someone else. Both of you. We've prepared new documentation, new backstory, new location. You'll be ordinary people with ordinary lives. Think you can handle that?" Dominic's laugh was soft, almost disbelieving. "I think that's exactly what I need." That night, our last night as Dominic Castellano and Maisie Brooks, we sat in the backyard with Zeus sprawled between us, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and possibility. "Nervous?" I asked, my hand finding his. "Terrified," he admitted. "I've been Dominic Castellano my entire life. Tomorrow I'll be..." "Who?" "Someone who's never lived in a mansion, never commanded an empire, never had people fear my name. I don't know how to be that person." "Neither do I said honestly. "But we'll learn together. That's what makes it an adventure instead of just terrifying." Zeus lifted his head, looking between us with those intelligent dark eyes, and his tail thumped once against the grass. In dog language that meant, "I'm here. I'm with you. We're pack." "What do you think he'll make of his new life?" Dominic asked, scratching behind Zeus's ears. "Suburban dog, normal walks, no bodyguards or threats or chaos. I think he'll love it. He never wanted to be a weapon. He just wanted to be a dog." I smiled. "Same way you never wanted to be your father. You just wanted to be yourself." Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Marry me." I turned to stare at him. "What?" "Marry me. Tomorrow, when we become new people, let's become new people together, as husband and wife." His eyes held mine. "I love you, Maisie. I've loved you since you knelt down in my dining room and showed me that strength isn't about domination or control. It's about understanding, patience, the courage to be vulnerable. He swallowed hard. I want to spend the rest of my life becoming the man you see when you look at me. The man I could be if I'm brave enough to try. Tears blurred my vision. Yes. Yes, of course, yes. He kissed me then, soft and deep and full of promise, while Zeus woofed happily beside us, and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. Tomorrow, we would become different people. But tonight, for one last night, we were exactly who we'd always been. Two broken souls and a traumatized dog. All of us learning that healing was possible, that change was survivable, that love could bloom even in the darkest soil. 3 years. That's how long it took to build a life from nothing. We became Daniel and Melissa Carter, a couple who'd moved to rural Montana to start an animal rescue sanctuary. The FBI had helped with the initial setup, finding the property, establishing the legal framework, creating a backstory that explained our sudden appearance in a community where everyone knew everyone. After that, we were on our own. The sanctuary started small, a converted barn, 6 kennels, and Zeus as our first permanent resident. We took in dogs that other shelters couldn't handle, the aggressive ones, the traumatized ones, the ones with behavioral issues that made them unadoptable. I used everything I'd learned rehabilitating Zeus and Dominic, Daniel now, proved to have a natural gift for working with damaged animals. He understood them in a way most people couldn't, recognized their pain because he'd lived it. Another intake coming today, I called from the office, reviewing the email from a shelter 3 counties over. 7-year-old German Shepherd, owner surrender after biting incident. They want to euthanize but thought we might take him first. Daniel appeared in the doorway, Zeus at his side as always. Even after 3 years, the Pitbull rarely let either of us out of his sight. Bite history means we'll need to do a full behavioral assessment. Can you clear the afternoon? Already done. I smiled at him, still marveling sometimes at how different he looked from the intimidating crime lord I'd first met. He wore jeans and flannel now, his hands calloused from physical work instead of smooth from luxury. His hair was longer, sun-streaked from hours outdoors. He looked younger somehow, despite the gray threading through his temples. He looked free. "How many does this make?" he asked, consulting the board where we tracked all our residents. 43 currently in rehabilitation. 17 successfully rehomed in the last year. I stood, moving into his arms automatically. This too had become routine. The casual touches, the easy affection, the absolute certainty that we belong together. "We're doing good work, Daniel." He still flinched slightly at the new name, even after 3 years. Some habits died hard, but he smiled, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "We're doing good work, Melissa." The German Shepherd arrived that afternoon, a massive male named Sergeant who'd spent his entire life in a backyard, poorly socialized and frightened of his own shadow. The bite incident, we quickly determined, had been a fear response to a child who'd cornered him. Sergeant wasn't aggressive. He was terrified. "Remind you of anyone?" I murmured to Daniel as we watched Sergeant huddle in the corner of his kennel, refusing to make eye contact. "Me 3 years ago," he admitted, trapped in a life I didn't choose, lashing out at anyone who got too close, convinced I was a monster because that's what everyone expected. I squeezed his hand. We'd had this conversation in various forms over the years. The processing of his old life, the gradual acceptance that he'd made the right choice, the slow rebuilding of his identity. It was ongoing work, just like Zeus's rehabilitation had been. Some wounds healed quickly. Others took years. Zeus padded over to Sergeant's kennel, laying down just outside it with his characteristic patience. He'd become the sanctuary's unofficial greeter, the dog who showed newcomers that trust was possible. Watching him now, calm and confident. I could barely reconcile him with the anxious, aggressive animal I'd first met. "I'm going into town for supplies," Daniel said, checking his watch. "Should be back by dinner. Need anything?" "Just the usual. Oh, and we're low on the calming supplements for the anxious cases." He nodded, dropping another kiss on my head before heading to his truck. I watched him drive away. Zeus now returned to my side, and felt that familiar swell of gratitude for the life we'd built. It wasn't glamorous. We worked 12-hour days, lived in a modest house on the property, drove a 10-year-old truck, and counted every dollar. But it was honest work, meaningful work, and we did it together. That's why I didn't immediately panic when a sleek black sedan pulled up the sanctuary drive 2 hours later. Probably someone inquiring about adoption, though the expensive car was unusual for our usual clientele. I wiped my hands on my jeans and headed to the office, Zeus trotting beside me with his tail wagging. The man who entered was in his 50s, well-dressed but not flashy, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor that immediately put me on edge. I'd learned to read people during my time in Dominic's world, and this man screamed federal agent. "Melissa Carter?" he asked, though his eyes were already confirming my identity. "Yes. Can I help you?" "Special Agent Richardson, FBI." He produced identification that looked legitimate. "I'm here about your husband." My heart stopped. "Is he hurt? Did something happen?" "No, nothing like that. He's fine." Richardson glanced around the office, taking in the photos on the wall, us with various rehabilitation success stories, Zeus in dozens of poses, the sanctuary's growth documented in images. "You've built something impressive here." "What do you want, Agent Richardson?" "To offer you both a choice." He sat without being invited, clearly comfortable asserting authority. "You're aware that Daniel, forgive me, Dominic, testified against multiple criminal organizations 3 years ago. Those cases are wrapping up now. Final sentencing, tying off loose ends. We were told witness protection was permanent. It is, unless you choose otherwise." Richardson leaned forward. "The FBI has been monitoring the situation. The major players are all in prison or dead. The organizations have fractured. Frankly, the threat level to you both has decreased significantly. You could return to your old identities if you wanted. Reclaim your previous lives." I stared at him. "Why would we want that?" "Your husband, Dominic Castellano, was one of the youngest and most successful crime bosses in Chicago's history. He had wealth, power, connections. All of it is still there, frozen in legal limbo. The legitimate parts of his empire could be reactivated. He could be someone again. He is someone. He's my husband, a sanctuary co-director, and one of the best dog rehabilitators I've ever worked with." My voice hardened. Whatever Dominic Castellano was, he's gone. Daniel Carter is who we are now. Richardson smiled slightly. "I thought you'd say that, but I needed to make the offer officially. There's paperwork to finalize the permanent transition, declaring Dominic Castellano legally dead, transferring any remaining legitimate assets to your new identities, closing that chapter entirely. You'll need to sign." He produced a folder thick with documents. I skimmed them, saw the legal language that would officially end our old lives. It should have felt momentous. Instead, it felt like acknowledging something that had already happened 3 years ago. "I'll need my husband to review these first." "Of course. I'll wait." Daniel returned an hour later, arms full of supplies, and stopped dead when he saw Richardson sitting in our office. His entire body went rigid, Zeus immediately pressing against his leg in response to the sudden tension. "It's okay," I said quickly, moving to him. "He's just here with paperwork. Final closure on the old case." I watched Daniel read through the documents, saw the emotions flickering across his face. Relief, sadness, something that might have been grief for the life he'd left behind. When he finally looked up, his eyes found mine. "This makes it real," he said quietly. Dominic Castellano dies on paper. There's no going back after this. Do you want to go back? He looked around the office, at the photos of rescue dogs we'd saved, at Zeus lying contentedly in his bed, at me standing beside him. No, never. We signed the papers together, our new signatures on legal documents that erased our old identities. Richardson witnessed, filed everything in his briefcase, and stood to leave. For what it's worth, he said at the door, you made the right choice, both of you. What you're doing here. He gestured at the sanctuary. It matters more than you probably realize. After he left, Daniel and I stood in the office, holding each other while Zeus pressed against our legs. The weight of finality should have been crushing. Instead, it felt like freedom. No more looking over our shoulders, I murmured. No more wondering if someone from your past will find us. It's really over. The old life is over, Daniel agreed. This one's just beginning. That evening, we walked the property together, checking on all 43 residents. Sargent had finally accepted a treat from Daniel's hand. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. A 3-legged retriever we'd taken in last month was learning to navigate the agility course. 2 bonded terriers who'd been rescued from a hoarding situation were playing chase in one of the exercise yards. We should expand, Daniel said suddenly, looking at the barn we'd converted into kennels. There's that land adjacent to our property. We could build a proper training facility, maybe take on more difficult cases. That would require funding, grants, maybe a fundraiser. I leaned against him. Think we can manage it? We've managed everything else. He smiled down at me. I went from commanding a criminal empire to scooping dog poop and building kennels from scratch. I think I can handle writing grant applications. That's my favorite thing about you, I said. You're so humble now. His laugh was genuine, unguarded. This was who he'd become. A man who could laugh at himself, who found purpose in physical work, who measured success in rehabilitated dogs instead of territory controlled. He was exactly the man I'd seen potential for that first day in his dining room, when Zeus had responded to gentleness instead of force. We ended up at Zeus's favorite spot on the property, a hill that overlooked the entire sanctuary. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and Zeus sat between us with his characteristic contentment. Think he remembers? Daniel asked, scratching behind Zeus's ears. The mansion, the danger, who we used to be. Dogs live in the present. He remembers we're his pack, we're safe, and we're together. The rest doesn't matter to him. Smart dog. The smartest. I watched Zeus's tail wag slowly, his eyes half closed in contentment. He taught us everything we needed to know, really, about trust, patience, healing, about how strength isn't about control. It's about letting go of the need to control. Daniel pulled me closer, and we sat there as the sun set on our old lives and rose on the ones we'd chosen. Below us, 43 dogs were settling in for the night, some still fearful, some healing, some ready to trust again. Each one a reminder that change was possible, that trauma didn't have to be permanent, that with patience and understanding, even the most damaged souls could learn to hope again. Zeus rested his head on my knee, and Daniel's arm wrapped around my shoulders. And in that moment, I understood what home really meant. Not a mansion, or an apartment, or even a place. Home was this. 2 people and a dog who'd all been broken in different ways, all learned to heal together, all chose each other every single day. The sanctuary lights came on automatically as darkness fell, illuminating the kennels like beacons. Inside, I could hear the settling sounds of our residents, the soft patting of paws, the occasional bark, the rustle of bedding. Tomorrow we'd start again. Assessments, training, rehabilitation. the slow, patient work of teaching damaged creatures that they deserved better than they'd been given. "Thank you," Daniel said quietly into the darkness. "For what?" "For seeing something worth saving when everyone else saw a monster. For teaching me that change was possible. For building this life with me." He paused. "For loving me when I couldn't love myself." I turned to kiss him, soft and deep and full of 3 years of partnership and healing and choosing each other. Zeus woofed softly, not wanting to be left out, and we both laughed. "We're Pack," I said simply. "That's what Pack does." And that's how we'd spend the rest of our lives. A former crime boss, an animal behaviorist, and a rehabilitated Pitbull, running a sanctuary where broken things learned to be whole again. Where violence transformed into patience. Where control became trust. Where the past didn't have to determine the future. Zeus had taught us all of that in those first few weeks when I'd knelt on Dominic Castellanos' marble floor and seen not a dangerous animal, but a frightened soul desperate to be understood. Everything that came after, the danger, the choice, the new life, had flowed from that single moment of compassion. 3 years later, we were still choosing compassion every day, and every day, it was enough.